Today on the podcast, I'm joined by trombonist, composer, and educator David Gibson, a driving force on the New York's jazz scene. David has performed with legends like Slide Hampton, Roy Hargrove, and Jimmy Heath, and has released many acclaimed albums as a bandleader. His compositions and arrangements have been featured by the Grammy-nominated Captain Black Big Band and ensembles across the country. With a deep commitment to mentorship and the jazz tradition, David continues to inspire both on stage and in the classroom. And we're live. David, thanks so much for talking with me today. How you doing?
Well, I'm doing pretty good, and thanks for thinking that I might have something interesting to say.
Well, you know what's interesting? I was thinking about the first thing I wanted to ask you, because I haven't spoken to that many trombonists before, and there aren't as many trombonists in this industry as there are saxophone or pianists. Is it harder or easier? Because it's almost like I feel trombone can be sort of a niche instrument in what's already a niche genre.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, the slice of the pie gets even smaller. The sliver is very small when you start considering the presence of trombone on the scene. My personal feeling about it is, I certainly was mentored by trombonists like Slide Hampton and Benny Powell and Curtis Fuller. I admire trombonists, and the trombonists that I was privy to, people like J.J. Johnson or Slide, they were total musicians. So they weren't defined by the instrument. They were composers, they were band leaders, they were arrangers. So, I would, I've aspired to that kind of a footprint in the scene. I know that a lot of people don't look at the trombone as I mean, let's put it like this. Some years ago, maybe 2003, when there was still a Thelonious Monk competition, they had, after 18 years, the first Thelonious Monk competition to feature trombone. Now, I think it's noteworthy that before they addressed trombone as a jazz instrument, they addressed hand percussion first. I do believe that says a little bit about how the trombone is perceived in the jazz realm. So, is it difficult? I don't know. I think it's just difficult to be an artist in general, whether your vocation is as a jazz musician or perhaps you want to be a painter. It's it's hard. So I don't want to get into a woe is me mentality, but yes, it can be a challenge for me to introduce myself as a trombonist and be received perhaps as enthusiastically as a saxophone player or a guitar player.
So I've had conversations privately with people, and they say it's even harder to get booked or present a project at a festival just because of this instrument, which really makes no sense.
Well, I mean, it does make sense in a sense. I think people are visual,
Right.
and visually, I think it was J.J. Johnson in an interview on NPR that I heard years ago, who described the trombone as a gangly, awkward instrument. And I think that describes the situation pretty well. Um, I think that any brass player or wind player is has the same difficulty as perhaps a hockey player or a football player, in the sense that when you want to engage and identify with the person that you're seeing, you don't get to see their face really. You're seeing this kind of distorted version of their face, and we tend to be pretty visual. So, it does present that obstacle, but it's not the only instrument.
Yeah, and you've had these great mentors, people that helped you get to be the artist you are today. So, as far as mentorship and education is concerned, what do you think jazz education gets right, but what does it miss at the same time? You think?
Well, I'm of a particular age where um I've been privy to be a part of jazz education, but also I've been a part of it as a student and as an educator, but I've also seen a certain evolution in jazz education. So, one of one of the ways that I think jazz education, so to speak, could be better is that if it was more of a mentorship model that wasn't about getting a degree necessarily. Because I think once you start factoring in getting a degree, you're jumping through certain hoops that are about the system, and you might be in a good position to teach somebody how to be a jazz educator, but not necessarily in a position or even with the freedom to teach somebody how to be a jazz artist or a jazz musician. And so I'm sure there are a lot of musicians who consider themselves jazz musicians that might not consider themselves jazz artists necessarily. I just there are a lot of little delineations there. Generally, my approach to jazz education is I try to reflect on my own experience and figure out what it is that I missed. One of the things that I see people getting now is a lot of the information has been codified in general, and people have a firm grasp. Students have a firm grasp of the history and the language of the music in a way that I didn't see so much outside of a few places, like perhaps maybe Indiana University was a place where you would hear the vernacular of jazz. But I don't recall. I think there was always a pursuit or an understanding of theory, but melody ends up being a little bit more mysterious. And so I think what I try to convey to my students is that there is kind of a foundational set of principles and skills that everybody should aspire to understand and get some mastery. Transcription ends up being a way that you can pursue that goal, but transcription misses the mark somewhat because you're only transcribing a soloist. So you're not transcribing the entire band. So you're not seeing what everyone's doing and why this decision might have been made at that time. And then once you get to a point where you've got some facility with the basics, I think just like we as people, we start out, I'll put it like this. I used to talk to Curtis Fuller on the phone once a week. And when I would call his home, his son would often answer the phone. And I would think it was Curtis because his son sounded like his dad. Well, isn't that normal, right? Isn't that normal that a son would have the same accent, the same perhaps even way of describing things, the same vernacular? And we all go through that. We start out as the immediate community that we're part of is our immediate family. And we think like our family thinks, and we say things the way our family says them. And then we branch out into our community, and then we think like our community thinks, and we say things that our community says. And then we get even further out if we tend to leave our community and experience other communities. Then we start hearing the way that people say things that we didn't think of, that weren't introduced to us. You get to a certain age, and some idea is presented to you in a way, and it resonates with you. You think, oh, that's a better way to say that than I've ever said it. And the thing about it is, based on where you come from, those moments are going to be different for you than they are for me, than they are for someone else. The thing that's magical for me to hear is different than someone else. And I feel the same way about the music. You get to a certain point where, let's say, you've transcribed, 50 solos by a bunch of different people, and you start to recognize what they all have in common. And that's the foundational stuff. And then you start to have those moments where you could listen to the same recording that I listened to, and measure 5, your eyes light up, and measure 9, my eyes light up. And so then I take measure 9 and I find a way to make that mine. I find a way to use that as part of my dialect, as part of my vernacular, because we're not making things up necessarily. We're just adopting ways of thinking and ways of saying things that the amalgam of all of those experiences becomes personal. It's why I can listen to Lee Morgan, and I can listen to Freddie Hubbard, and I can listen to Clifford Brown, and I can hear this common philosophy amongst all of them, but I would never mistake them for one another. They all sound like themselves.
You also said that you try to teach your students about the experiences you had, explain those situations that you've been into musically to them. Is there a collaboration that you had that pushed your artistry in a totally different direction over the years that really sticks out?
Well, I always had, I always wanted to be around older people. I always wanted to be around my elders. And so, I sought them out. The reason I was mentored by Slide Hampton and Curtis Fuller and Benny Powell is because I called them on the phone. I wanted to talk to them. I wanted to hear how they thought about things. I wanted to get information from the source, and I didn't want to try and figure it out on my own necessarily. And I mean, I guess that's what mentorship is. And yeah, I can't necessarily say that there was one thing that did it, but just the constant sense of trying to figure it out in the thick of it, like to be thrown into the game, to be on the bandstand and turn to Slide and say, Slide, I'm sorry, I just played everything that I stole from you. And then have him say something like, well, just leave me something to play, David. And then how do I digest that? And what do I do with it? And what does that mean? And yeah, so I mean, I don't know if that quite answers the question, but I think it's just the discomfort, just to constantly be uncomfortable and having to figure it out as you go has been
It
helpful.
also sounds like you're just able to speak honestly to him, and not let anything, not hold anything back because you're trying to get the information. So you're showing who you are entirely.
Well, sure, and I think the thing that resonates with me is that sure, I'm showing him, but if he's who I think he is, he sees it anyway.
Mhm.
Like, what am I going to do? Fool him? That's one of the things that I've learned as I've gotten older. And so one of the things that I notice when I deal with people who are younger than me now is that many times and certainly not just I have not just seen the jazz education evolution. I've also seen the evolution of the way we engage as people. And so there's a lot of curation into how you present yourself.
That's another thing I wanted to ask you too. If social media, does it help or hurt the jazz musicians?
Well, it's just another tool as far as I'm concerned. I tend to shy away from I mean, I've been enticed by that venue where it seems that you can share your thoughts about everything. And I've stopped doing that over the years because, first of all, who am I to be sharing my thoughts about everything? I'm really not an expert about very many things in my life. And I might do better to just like leave it to the experts on a lot of things. And also too, there's the algorithm rewards negativity and anger and outrage, and that's just not really what I'm trying to do. And that's not what I want my music to be doing. I mean, certainly my music might express frustration when I'm frustrated, or it might express anger if I'm angry, but that's not all there is. That I don't want to be branded as somebody who's outraged. It's just not what I'm about. I'm trying to put something positive into the world and have a relationship with an audience. And if that, I it's very easy to establish a bond based on common enemies, but it's not really sustainable. There's fatigue that comes with that.
Where did that, you know, those negative feelings come from? Just the struggles of being an artist in today's society.
Well, I tend to be somebody who's trying to, I mean, if you're observant, you can see hypocrisy in every single moment of every single day. And
Yeah.
it usually starts with me. I'm the first example of hypocrisy that I see every day. Only if not in my actions, then in my thoughts.
Well,
You know?
we're multifaceted. There's two sides. There's two sides to the coin. It's
Yeah, I just, I I mean, certainly I wrote a lot of music during COVID that was born of the circumstances that we were sharing. And even if I was frustrated or angry or anxious, whatever those were, it wasn't always directed at someone or something. It was just an overall sense of dissonance because, it's like, I'll never forget the phrase, a human being can withstand an incredible amount of pain as long as they know when it will end. And so we didn't know what was going to happen or when it was going to end. And so that tends to, it tends to drive up the production of cortisol in the brain. And, you know, I mean, I'm just like anybody else in that regard. But the thing that really resonated with me once we started getting out again after COVID was, oh man, I missed connecting with people. I missed that sense of, I can play something or I can say something and I can see the reflection of that in someone else. And sometimes that might be, I'm anxious or I'm frustrated or I'm angry. And then they say, I feel that way too. And sometimes it can be, like I'll never forget, after 9/11, I remember, everyone walking around being afraid to smile for several days, perhaps even weeks. And I remember the first time I was on a subway car and everyone was being quiet, and there was a young child who was running around acting crazy, and everyone smiled. And I just remember, oh my God, I just smiled right now. And it's like, there's that too. Like we all know what that is. And, I want my music and my relationship with the audience to be human, not a singular facet that's, as I said before, curated to manipulate somebody's response. I'd rather just like share something honest that I think, and then just trust that somebody out there thinks that too.
it sounds like you really, your music these things just about a positive, giving the audience and yourself a positive experience, and the other musicians you work with. Just it sounds like it's in a good place. We all know the business side of things can take away from that. And for someone like yourself, is there something about this business that you wish you learned earlier? Yeah.
Well, I think that, uh, well, the word persistence is really valuable. And when I was younger, I would get deterred by rejection. And it's really, rejection needs to be,
Rejection. I love it. I eat that for breakfast.
well, good for you, man. I wasn't there for years.
I think that's like the best thing. It's like if nothing fuels that more than rejection.
Well, you know, I mean, rejection is a form of failure. And the way I think about things now is that failure is a necessary part of any journey. If we went to see a movie and the main character didn't fail in the movie, then we might walk out after like 15, 20 minutes because there would be nothing to watch anymore. And I've done a lot of pursuit of learning, just about how we learn, how people learn, and failure is almost always the best teacher. So, rejection as failure is just an opportunity to recalibrate and find a better way to do the thing that you're trying to do. And
I feel like a lot of the years and years of playing music, and especially if you're trying to really play what you hear and develop your own ideas because there is something specific you want to do, like there's going to be more failure than success.
well, yeah, I mean, look, man, a Hall of Fame baseball player, what's their batting average? It's like three something. That means like 60 to 70% of the time they're failing at
Mhm.
their task. It's like so I think that um what is the most gratifying to me on the bandstand is when the audience is engaged with the ensemble's engaged with itself, and there are risks being taken and perhaps failure, but it's the answer to the failure that ends up being the thing that's exhilarating for everyone. It's when you don't know where it's going, and then all of a sudden it links up. And
There's one, like, now that you're talking about this, there's one thing I like to ask certain people. I'm very curious about this topic. When things aren't going your way or the way you hear on the bandstand, which is when it's just not happening for one reason or another, whether it's the room or just something's not clicking with the bass player or the drummer, or it's like the gig can become painful sometimes, even though it's because of that. So how do you navigate those? Do you have a certain process to rise above that and come out the other side?
well, depending on the circumstance, sometimes, well, um, certain rooms, as you mentioned, can be tough. So I look at it as if it's always a conversation, then I can't be the only one talking. So in that regard, I try to come up with something that I have to offer, a strong statement, opinion that I can offer, and then listen for what everyone else thinks about that on the bandstand, and then follow the thread of that conversation without trying to, because what I know about myself is if I'm feeling uncomfortable on the bandstand in a physical way, having trouble hearing myself or having trouble with my instrument, whatever the case may be, my defensive, reflexive go-to is to play more and to keep playing to try and find it. And ultimately, when I do that, I'm just saying more things that are awkward and uncomfortable without giving anyone a chance to interject and offer something positive that I can engage with. So I try to say less in those circumstances now, and not try and drive the thing and overcome whatever the because I have teammates, I have bandmates with me. I don't have to do it all. Besides which, I'm a trombone player. I can't do it all, you know.
And it's like you said too, what you hear when you listen to a recording, whether it's measure five, the other musician might hear it in measure nine, so it might not feel good to you, but then the other musician that, oh no, I don't feel any different than it usually feels. It's all perception at the end of the
Yeah,
day.
we're all listening to the filter of our own agendas. I mean, that's first and foremost, is everyone has an agenda. They have an expectation of what it is that they think is correct, or what it is that they're trying to achieve. And so, it's like I've been fortunate to play with people, especially some of my peers who are very in tune with the idea of shedding their own agendas and being open to the thing that's about to happen, and not come in with some preconceived notion of I have to do this or I have to say this. Yeah, well, I'm working on it. I'm definitely working on it.
No, but I mean it's the I don't know. I've been thinking more about this. I've been trying to I like to say figure out how to play jazz for like 20 years. And like I'm now thinking like in order for the music for me to like really just enjoy it, I have to like leave. Like when I go play in front of people, I have to like say goodbye to myself and just let go.
Oh, Yeah, I mean, the phrase that comes to mind is that instead of trying to make something happen, you let something happen.
Right. Mhm.
You know.
Now this has been such a great conversation. We're gonna have to do part two. You're very interesting.
Oh, dude, I'm game anytime, man. I appreciate that you do this. This is wonderful.
Thank you so much. So, what's coming up for you in the upcoming weeks that you're looking forward to?
Well, I love playing with my band wherever we play. So we're playing at Smalls, I think next week on a Thursday. No, it's coming up soon. I guess it's in May. Maybe it's May 15th, something like that. We're playing Smalls, playing Django later in the month. Gonna be at Cellar Dog with my organ group. And yeah, it's just the little rotation and then whatever else I can fit in, doing some Captain Black stuff. We're down at Exit Zero Fest with Captain Black coming up. Yeah.
In May.
Yeah, Cape May. That's right. That's right. Yeah. So, I find that, I'm in a privileged position at this stage in my life where I have, I have the luxury of being around musicians that challenge me, but encourage me to be myself. So it's really fortunate position. I don't feel like I'm auditioning so much at this point in my life.
Oh, you're lucky. You're definitely lucky.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've chosen the path too, and you know what, I wish it was a little bit a wider path or perhaps a busier path, but it's okay. It's like I'm not done yet.
We're never done. So,
No.
David Gibson, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much.
Hey, thank you, Ed. Appreciate it, man.